People were trained from childhood. In every human culture, there's not a single society on earth that fails to train their members from childhood in this rule that says, I am obligated to give back to you if you have first given to me. So if you invite me to a party, I should invite you to one of mine. If you remember my birthday with a card, I should remember yours with a card. And if you do me a favor, mate, I owe you a favor. And people say yes to those they owe. You can see the implication right away. You have to go first.
Welcome to the Waste No Day podcast, a podcast specifically for and about the home services industry as it relates to plumbing, heating, air conditioning, and electrical. More than a podcast, Waste No Day is a credo, a determination, a mindset. It is a never-ending discipline. It is a refuse to lose pursuit. It is a wake-up call every morning to waste no day. Now here's your hosts, Brian Burton and Nate Minnick.
Hey, welcome to another episode of the Waste No Day podcast. Your host, Nate and Brian, hanging out with you again and looking forward to another great show. We are very honored and super privileged to have none other than Dr. Robert Cialdini joining us today. That's right, the author of Influence himself and so much more. He is going to be joining us to talk about the power of influence and how to ethically use it in your sales presentation. This one's going to go deep, and we're looking forward to a great conversation with him. But before we do, we're going to take a little bit of time to introduce the idea of influence to yourselves. And we're going to start off with a quote from Brian.
Pre-Suasion is what you say immediately before you deliver your message that leverages your success tremendously. None other than Dr. Robert Cialdini.
All right. Okay. So the concept there of persuasion, right? So made up word meaning before. Curious, Brian, in terms of what it's reflecting upon there, is it actually saying something or is it just kind of anything that comes before?
Well, yeah, I guess it's anything that comes before because I don't want to step on the interview too much because I'm sure we're going to go into it. But his second book was Pre-Suasion, and it's all about setting yourself up by what you say or do, because a lot of it is gift giving, that type of thing, before the presentation or the call, or sometimes even before you meet a client, setting yourself up for them to want to buy.
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. It's just a psychological study with surveys and statistics throughout the entire book. I mean, we could do 6 episodes just breaking that book down. It'll be a lot of work, but the fun kind of work, not like walking up the steps when it's time to do a podcast episode. Just like, oh gosh, it's way up there.
Yeah, it'll probably get psychoanalyzed by the good doctor.
But my favorite, and hopefully we have time to dive into this today with Bob, as he goes by. My favorite part about that quote was leverage. And I don't know about HVAC techs and electricians and garage door guys and the solar people and the swimming pool people and all the other now 19 different industries that I know of that are listening to the show. But plumbers, I know we have to use leverage sometimes. Like if you have like your pipe wrench and you're trying to say break like a 3-inch union apart or something on a commercial job. Well, your pipe wrench isn't long enough to get that job done oftentimes, but you can take like 1.5 inch piece of copper or galvanized steel, a pipe, and you slide that over the handle and make the handle say twice as long. And all of a sudden that thing pops right off. That's leverage. And in this case, the leverage is what you're saying or doing before you even talk about product that is setting your client into a mindset of a person who will purchase from you. And it's so good. It had been a long time since I read Influence. And I don't know why such a gap in between reading it, because it's, maybe it's because it's so long ago. This is one of the first books I read. And you get this feeling like, oh, that's that. It's even like in a movie you saw a long time ago and you're like, well, that was good then, but I'm not sure it would hold up now, Well, I listened to the audiobook. It was like 20 hours long if you go regular speed, but I listened to the audiobook like prepping for this. And I was just like, wow, what am I doing listening to all these other books? Wow, Influence is just it's so high level. It's still to this day, top 3 to 5, probably top 3 books on sales and communication. Now, mind you, I don't know that you can just hold it up against another book and get as much out of it as you will that book. I don't know that there's another book like that out there, but there are books that just struck me a certain way. So I can, put them up in the range with it. But realistically speaking, you break that book down start to finish, it's probably the most comprehensive book on sales, marketing, communication that's ever been written. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. You get through the first chapter and maybe like an hour and a half, and you're like, this has been one of the best books on communication I've ever read. You're like, oh, I'm like 1/10 of the way through it. It's just, it's so rich. And the great part is he talked a lot about it's his voice. And I always love when the author uses his own voice. He didn't use his voice in Pre-Suasion and actually told me at breakfast that he regretted the fact that he didn't use his voice for that. And I'm like, me too. I regret that you didn't too. But this is the first person I've had a real good conversation with about the process of reading your audiobook. And mind you, his audiobook, like 20 hours of audiobook. And it was just a couple hours a day in a studio. And it was a lot of work. And it's like, there was one day he came in with like a sweater on, and the producer was like, do you have like long sleeves on or something? Because I can hear you touching your chest with your sleeve. It's like, take the sweater off and start over for the day. It's like, my gosh. It's just like how we do Waste No Day. Every mistake. I mean, we just cut and we start over for you guys because that's how much we care about the audience.
Wow.
It's an insane process, but I can see why he went around the second time. He's like, let's just hire somebody else to do it. It's like, it's a ton of work, but I love that it's him reading the book, and the amount of, it just felt like decades had to go into all the research for this book. Cause he's not just writing off the top of his head. There are studies done, like multiple studies in every chapter. And if you're like me at all, you like to read these studies and statistics more than just somebody talking about whatever they're saying. And like, yeah, it really is all you need in life in terms of a book about selling. Like if you have Influence in your hand, you probably never need to read another book, realistically.
Another beauty, Brian, is like, while he does have a doctorate in psychology, it's on an applicable level. Like we're talking about, two of us are able to understand what he's talking about.
Yeah, that helps.
It sure does. And what you're going to find today is, I think we get into the interview, is he's pretty down to earth. I mean, he speaks the common man's language, and that's going to be super beneficial for me.
Yeah. He's head of psychology at ASU, at Arizona State University. And I'm like, we agreed to have breakfast and just talk about the show and life a little bit before we did the episode, because he's like 45-minute drive to meet him at breakfast near his house. I'm like, yeah, please, I'll walk to make that happen if I have to. And I was telling my wife, I'm like, I'm somewhat nervous. I don't know that I've had breakfast with a smarter person than this. And, he could easily run circles around me to where my ears are smoking. And I'm just like, are you going to eat that? I can finish that for you. Chewing on my fork.
Brian's pointing at things on the menu. Me, eat.
What's that word? So, yeah, and it was nothing like that at all. He's very down to earth, super fun guy, super cool guy to hang with. You have very little idea that he's as smart as he is until you take a little ride with him mentally and start talking about a deep subject. And you're like, this guy is an endless fountain of wisdom and education. Applied education, I should say. He is one of these people who didn't just get a lot of education and doesn't really know what to do with it. He's applied it to his life and is a brilliant guy, super fun to talk to. I'm pumped that you get to spend an hour having a conversation with him.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This is going to be a good one. Before we get to that great content, though, we do want to take a quick minute to highlight one of you special reviewers and listeners out there who's taken the time to give us a review, and perhaps one of those coveted 5-star little button pushes. So, Brian, who are we bringing up today?
Great podcast. 5 stars. Best in-home sales podcast that does a great job of giving actionable steps and topping it with positive motivation. No general, vague sales speak. Actual stuff I run into every day. I listen to every show, and I have something to walk away with that moment. Great show, guys. Get that ad sponsorship. I want this show to go on forever. Get your money. Fist bump. Unc Donnie 96. This cat was born in 96 and he's an uncle? Goodness gracious. Well, shoot, he's 18.
Hey, maybe he graduated in 96, that was the thing.
Oh, yeah, could have graduated. Yeah. I always just assume it's your birth year.
Yeah, significant year. Got married in 96. I don't know.
Wait, did I say he's 18?
Started in the trades.
Sorry, it's 28.
It's okay. Nobody was checking that math.
Goodness, yeah. All right. Speaking of how bright Dr. Cialdini is. Yeah. I got a GED in rehab after dropping out of a Detroit public school, lady and gentlemen. I can do that math.
Well, we appreciate Unc, and thanks for the kind words, man.
Yeah, bro, appreciate it. Get that ad sponsorship. I want this show to go on forever. Get your money. We're in talks with some different ways that we could do it without reading somebody's commercial on the air, because it's never going to happen.
Maybe if you would stop offending literally every possible advertiser to us.
I do all right financially, bro. How do you do? You good? You know what
I'm
saying?
I'm doing okay. Yeah.
Yeah. We got this Viking ship and we don't need to be part of anybody's country. We're just out here on our own doing our thing. We can just offend anybody we want to offend and all is right with the world.
Well, there you go. Well, you know what else is right with the world? Dr. Robert Cialdini, and we're going to be putting him in your passenger seat. Our guest today is Dr. Cialdini. He has spent his entire career conducting scientific research on what leads people to say yes to requests. A small selection of his accomplishments include his 7 principles of persuasion that have become a cornerstone for any organization serious about effectively increasing their influence. His books, including Influence and Persuasion, have sold more than 10 million copies in 48 languages. He is known globally as the foundational expert in the science of persuasion and how to ethically apply it in business. We are very honored and excited to have him on the show. Welcome here, Doctor.
Thank you, Nate. I'm glad to be with you and Brian and look forward to our conversation.
Yeah, great to see you again. Bob, as he goes by, and I was fortunate. He was probably suffering through it, but I was fortunate to have breakfast with Bob early this week. And
Brian. He definitely was.
He suffered, probably, yes. Bob suffered through a breakfast with me, and it was a wonderful conversation. As I was telling my wife before I left, I'm like, he's like head of psychology at ASU. I'm like, I don't speak to people this intelligent very often. I'm like, I have no idea how. I mean, he's going to feel like he's playing tennis with a curtain or something. I feel like intellectually. And it ended up being a great conversation, both psychologically speaking, and we actually have some similarities in our background and families, and both from the Midwest. So it was a great conversation. I enjoyed it, and I'm here on Black Friday as we're recording this. At least I want to tell you I really appreciate it.
Well, I enjoyed it thoroughly.
And I enjoyed the books thoroughly. Influence, pardon the pun, had a massive influence on me and my communication style and skills very early in my career. And then I just probably read Pre-Suasion probably a couple of years ago. What is it? How old is that book?
It's about 3 years old.
Okay. Yeah, it must have been not long after it came out. I know it wasn't very long ago. But Influence is it's one of the OGs, as the kids like Nate would say. It's one of the original. Yeah, it's one of the original really deep psychological books on communication and selling. And I don't know if there was really one that was in depth like that before it. Were there many like that?
No, I took a chance at that time when I first wrote it because academics weren't supposed to speak to the popular audience without being called popularizers in this
Wow.
very negative kind of connotation. But I thought it was important because we owed it to the people who had paid for that research that we had done with their taxes and with the contributions to universities that they will sometimes make. They were entitled to know what we had found out about them with their money. It was their money. So I decided to write that book as an attempt to balance the scales, essentially let people know about the persuasion process, the influence process that they might not know, because they weren't likely to be reading the academic journals and outlets where we would publish this stuff just to one another and not to the larger community. And I thought that was a shame. And so that was the genesis for the book. But it was a while ago. And I have to say, that book's been good to me.
It's been good to us as well
than I could have sensibly imagined at the time. And I wrote it in a lot of languages. I have a friend in Poland, Professor Wilhelmina Wosinska, who wrote to me and she said, Bob, your book Influence is so famous in Poland, my students think you're dead. It was kind of sobering, but also affirming. So it sounds like a lot of people, and coming from a lot of different starting points, have found the principles of influence that I talk about there, one to a chapter, relevant to their cultures, their situations, and their circumstances. So yeah, I'm glad that you enjoyed it as well.
How did I don't know what you'd call it, but the psychologist, I guess, community receive it after the fact? Did it have the effect that you were worried about, or did they enjoy it? Or
it didn't. As I said, there was a quote from a British legal scholar who said, "You have never heard true condescension until you've heard an academic pronounce the word popularizer." I was worried about that. But what I did to stave it off, and I think successfully, was I didn't write the book just about my own research or even the research of the people in my subfield, which was experimental social psychology. I wrote it about evidence from what economists have found out about persuasion, about communication researchers, about what sociologists have found out about it, what anthropologists have found out. And so the book was about them as much as it was about me and my work. And there's a quote that I love. It's, "People don't sink the boats they're riding in. I put them in the boat with me." So to torpedo the boat was to torpedo themselves. I was talking about the value of their research, this behavioral science, essentially, having a scientific approach, a measurable approach to considering how successful you were at the influence process. If you have a particular offer to make or a particular case to make, right, there are features of it, there are merits inside that case. Well, what we found is if you present it this way, this many people say yes to it. If you present the same features this way, now this many people say yes to it. And that was worth including because it wasn't just about the theories of social influence and conformity and persuasion. It was about the practice of it. It was about the application of it so that people could increase their outcomes in various kinds of situations where they needed to be persuasive, as long as they did it ethically.
And this was a big shift because even now in a lot of training circles, but certainly before influence came out, features and benefits were how you sold.
Exactly.
This was how you sold. And then you probably take someone who was already killing it in their career at selling based on features and benefits, and then teach them the 7 principles of 6 principles, at least the first time I read it, and then 7 now of influence. And all of a sudden, that conversion rate is going to skyrocket because of how they're saying it.
That's right. How do you present the features and benefits? You don't change them. I mean, I'm not an expert on plumbing or HVAC or electrical equipment, but I can tell you how to deliver the merits of your case optimally. All right. So people resonate with that delivery, and it hits on some certain psychological strings inside them that you reach in and strum with those words, and they vibrate with assent.
Well, you can already tell that the content's going to be deep here, and looking forward to it. I'm sure the conversation you had with Brian was an interesting case study in psychology. Lots to unpack there. But this isn't about him. This is about you and your book here. Speaking of that, so in terms of like, your history or like your upbringing, you can care to share as much as you want to. But I guess at the end of the day, you kind of walked us through like why you wrote the book. You wanted to share some of that information with the popular audience, if you will. But like, was there any part of your backstory, your upbringing, or anything like that that kind of even drove you into the psychology field or into this concept of influence? Like, what is your history and how does that track?
Yeah. There were the earliest was that I was born into an entirely Italian family in a predominantly Polish neighborhood in a historically German city, Milwaukee, in an otherwise rural state. And in every one of those settings, the norms and the rules would change when I moved to the other one. And I recognized that, oh, wait a minute. It isn't just something that's static, that's concrete, that's the same everywhere. No, you have to manage the way you communicate in order to maximize the impact of that communication. You have to take into account the circumstances that you're in, the culture that you're in, the history, the precedents, and so on of the people in that situation, and align yourself with those preferences that they have for how to receive information and believe information. And so that was very important to me. And I thought, well, this is worth studying. It's not just the merits of the thing, it's the delivery of the merits of the thing that changes how successful you'll be in presenting your case. So I decided to study that. And the other thing is that all my life I'd been a sucker. I'd always been a pushover for the appeals of various fundraisers or magazine salesmen who would come to my door, and I would stand in unwanted possession of these things. And so it wasn't just out of self-defense that I thought this would be worth studying. I thought it was just an intriguing, intellectually interesting, and applicable. I mean, really, it's something everybody wants to know. If I'm ever at a party and people say, so what do you do and what do you study? And I say, I study persuasion. There's a crowd that gathers around me, right? And everybody has persuasion questions. They want to know how to be more persuasive. They want to know how to defend themselves against people who are trying to persuade them in unwelcome or unethical ways. And I mean, as soon as I admit to what I study, I no longer have access to the buffet table. That's gone. The rest of there's this circle of people around me so everybody wants to know about persuasion.
So the seventh concept of your book, and we'll get into it, of course, in detail, but is unity. And as I hear you kind of express like the melting pot of America and really your upbringing, all those types of things, do you find that your desire to find unity in those different like people groups contributed to, I don't know, I guess the outcome of who you became in such a way that like, were you more adaptive or were you more prone to desire adaptivity to the people group and trying to find unity because you had so much diversity in the groups you were mingling with?
Yeah, and I think that's a good point. But another underlying point is that I saw unity in those diverse groups. There were some commonalities that we all held true to. The way we were socialized, the way we evolved as a species, those were things that were true to all of us. And if we could put our fingers on those and raise those categories that we were all in, that defined ourselves or helped identify with, that would immediately bring a bonding experience, and people would be much more willing to want to deal with me further in those situations.
Yeah, and it's so important. And really all of these principles that we'll be talking about today are going to have relevance. So our audience is predominantly the men and women of the home services industry, specific to the trades generally plumbing, electrical, and HVAC is where a lot of our audience is, but we have gained followers in other sectors, from locksmiths to roofers to pavement and concrete guys, and the list goes on. But almost in all of these situations, perhaps in all of these situations, there is a person on the other end of the table who is in need of a service. That service is typically manual in nature. And, we have the audience of people who is not only skilled in doing the actual work, turning the wrench, those types of things, but also has to be able to communicate why it's important and relevant and valuable for them to choose me, and them to choose me at my price, which in the case of our particular audience is probably higher than most of the competitors.
Yeah.
So we're really looking forward to digging into this today.
Yeah. And I think there's a third choice as well. Why to choose me again? And that has to do with the ethics of how we do that process. We always have to be straight with them. We always have to be fair. And then they not only want to come back, they want to refer us to their neighbors and family.
Absolutely. And in our world, that's called Net Promoter Score. I don't know if you've ever heard of that term before. Yeah. There's many variations of it, but on a scale of 0 to 10, how likely are you to recommend us to your friends or family? Anything 9 or 10 is like a good, anything 7 or 8 is a neutral, and anything 6 and below is actually a detractor. They're going to go the other way. They're going to talk about your services negatively to other people. So you're right. The ethics piece is a massive part of influence, because our podcast is not out there to be snake oil salesmen. We're not out there to be trying to figure out how to get one over on the homeowner. It's quite the opposite. We're looking forward to getting into that. So the book is Influence, the Psychology of Persuasion. It outlines 7 principles of this concept here. And I know you'd like to go through them kind of in depth, which we're really excited to do. I'll highlight them at least at a title level. So it's reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, authority, liking, scarcity, and then unity. So those are the 7 principles. Of course, it's all detailed out in the book, and we'll give you some time to share about that at the end. But let's dig into the first one here. So reciprocity, which is a big word. I know Brian had to sound that one out when he first saw it. But we're looking to understand, what does that mean? And then how is it valuable to me as a plumber or electrician or somebody like that, or just anybody in general when it comes to this concept of influence?
Well, I can break it down to the old give and take. People were trained from childhood. In every human culture, there's not a single society on earth that fails to train their members from childhood in this rule that says, I am obligated to give back to you if you have first given to me. Right? So if you invite me to a party, I should invite you to one of mine. If you remember my birthday with a card, I should remember yours with a card. And if you do me a favor, mate, I owe you a favor. And people say yes to those they owe. So you can see the implication right away. You have to go first. This is not the usual way of giving resources or favors or gifts or service to people who, after they've signed the contract or after you've done the business, you give them a nice gift or a thank you gift or something like that. No, this is before. This is in order to get them to sign the contract, in order to get them to want to partner with you, because you're a giver. You've given them something. And I'll give you an example from some McDonald's restaurants in the countries of Colombia and Brazil. So not just in the United States. They decided to do a promotion one week, and researchers helped them with this. Every family that came into the McDonald's, the kids got a balloon. Each of the kids got a balloon. Half of them got a balloon as they left to thank them for patronizing the McDonald's, right? Nice thank you gift. The other half got a balloon when they entered, each kid. And their parents bought 25% more food. 2 things there. You go first, and people are trained. They are schooled. They are socialized from childhood to give back. And if you give to my kids, you've given to me. Do a favor for my kids. You've done a favor for me, and I owe you. Right?
It's interesting you bring that up. I know a lot of our audience carries around dog treats or something like that. because, a lot of people in America have dogs or pets or whatever. And so not only is it an easy way to, buy off the trust of the dog so they're not yapping at your legs, but also a lot of people find, the fact that if you offer some type of gift to even their pet, that it's like, say, an extension of good grace.
Exactly.
And so I think there's a great way to start that off. And another thing that came to mind is, in the home services industry, I mean, the people in the field, they could charge for everything, like everything. Many of our audience has a service call fee, even just to show up, just to knock on your door, right? And then from there can be diagnostic fees and turning the wrench fees and like you name it. We can fee this thing out. And yet I wonder, Brian's done stuff like this before where, hey, I'm just going to take care of that for you. Like I found this thing, it's no big deal. Normally it would have a cost to it. I'm just going to take care of it for you. Bringing that up into the equation is sort of an extension of this reciprocity concept where I'm giving you a little bit of something. It's not normally something I would charge.
Absolutely.
And now you're feeling indebted. So I guess the question for me, doctor, it would be like, how do we do this without making it feel like we are manipulating the situation, right? Because it feels like if it's done improperly, it could sound like, hey, Bob, listen, this is usually $1,000, but for you, Bob, hey, I'm going to do it for nothing.
Yeah. And then you talk to your friend and he said the same thing to me, right? So now you're revealed as a fraud. So no, you give something genuinely. If there's something that you see that you feel, okay, I can walk that back. I don't need, you have to say it. You can't just do it and expect to have the benefits of a reciprocal arrangement. No, you have to say it. The other thing is that it doesn't have to be something that's economic. It can be information that you provide that they don't have, but not information that leads to you signing a contract to fix it. It's information that will help them as a homeowner. Right? I always advise when I speak to folks in home industry is bring in a tip card of safety tips for their house that they can put up or they can have where they can just tell them how to protect your home, how to secure it, how to optimize the appeal of it in a sale. And so all these things that aren't directly related to you, but are going to increase their outcomes. Man, does that make a difference? So it doesn't have to be safety tips. It could be something like, here are the numbers you should call in case of an emergency. And then you have your company's name at the bottom of that. They put it up and they see it every time they open that cupboard door. And there it is, right? In a lot of places, if you ever go to conferences, I do speaking at conferences, and a lot of them, whoever's sponsoring it will give everybody in the audience a notebook and a pen, right, to take notes with. And then they'll have the company's name on it. Right? Okay. For your best customers, you can't, right? For your best customers, if you're going to give them something like a pen, put their name on it. Personalize that gift. So it's not just something you're giving out, like telling people the time of day. It's something special for them. Right? I had a client who did that, put my name on a pen with their name underneath it. Every other conference I've been to, I get these pens, I throw them in a drawer with 50 others. This one, I put in my pocket. It's mine. So every gift that you give that you can customize to your recipient, right, that makes it more tailored to their circumstance. But things like safety tips for the house, of those kind, that works for everybody. And so it doesn't have to be material or it doesn't have to be economic. The other thing it can be is effort. There's research that shows if you put in more effort, people want to give that back to you. They want to go out of their way and maybe and go with an upgrade that you're requesting of them. Well, how do you communicate the effort? A lot of times you do some things and you've done, this is what we've done for you, all these different things, and you don't tell them. You just do it for them. And you've lost the power of what you've earned. We're not suggesting that you tell anybody anything that's not true. Tell them the steps that you went through with that water heater or the blockage. There's a lot of things you did. If you don't list them, they don't know all the steps you've taken. And they're not in a position to want to reciprocate for you as a result. So those are the kinds of things for reciprocity that we can do. They're costless.
That's even good on the back end. Like when we have an invoice written out, or let's just say we cabled a drain line open, and all it says is open clog.
Yeah.
$489.
Yeah.
I mean, you look at that and go, what, are you just blowing the pipe for 9 seconds and he's charging me $500? And
exactly.
But if you say unscrewed the toilet bolts, pulled the toilet, cleaned the floor, put the cable through, cabled out entire main line, ran the camera, visually inspected the line, cleaned up, brand new bolts, new caulk seal, reset toilet, tested, everything working fine. Well, that's a $488 job right there.
Right. Now you've gotten credibility for what you've done, but you've also shown levels of, and to the extent that you can give levels that are beyond what they thought they were going to get, that's going to trigger the reciprocity. Oh, now I've gotten something special. I need to give something special in return. And that can be a referral, for example.
Yeah. Or what we ask for here, which is, would you mind taking a pic with me in front of my truck that we can post to social media? Right. A lot easier to ask that question when you've gone above and beyond.
Right. And I'll tell you, there's something else that you can give them as a gift. And this has to do with one of the other principles that we talk about, authority. You tell them what you didn't do because they didn't need it. You never tell them that. Because you're being honest and you said, oh, no, you don't need this here. But you never tell them that you bypassed an opportunity to tag them for something they didn't need. That's not who you are. That's a gift. Tell them what you didn't sell them.
Yeah.
You know, sometimes I talk to salespeople and say, so how do you not sell to people? How do you not sell to people? And they look at me like I'm crazy. They say, well, we don't offer them anything we think is not right for them. Did you tell them that? Here is our platinum package. We don't think that's right for you. Oh, all of a sudden, you've got honesty and credibility that you genuinely had and they didn't know it. And now you've brought it to consciousness. Right? So we didn't think you needed this. This is absolutely fine. It's old, but it's fine. We don't need to replace that. That's a gift. All these things, and by the way, these are what we call small bigs. They don't cost you a cent. They're a small change you make to your persuasive approach that produces a big change to your persuasive success. Because you've harnessed one of these principles without any cost or effort.
It's funny how many of those your books are chocked with. And for whatever reason, it made me think of I think he was a consultant who was charging people $75,000 for his consulting. And he was struggling and getting really heavy pushback on the price until he added one sentence before he would bring the price up. He would say, well, Nate, obviously I can't charge you $1 million for this, but here's what it does cost.
And now the difference between $1 million and 75,000 is in their minds, which was not in their minds before you said that one sentence.
Are you familiar with Alex Hormozi?
Sure. He blurbs my book.
He does. Yeah. He actually released his top 5 business books that helped him become who he is. And Influence was number 1 and Pre-Suasion was number 3. Number 2 isn't on this show, so we're not going to talk about it. But yeah, 2 of your books were in the top 3 all time for him. And he's the one he brought up the principle, although he didn't actually name that story, but I knew exactly what he was talking about, which was, he said you should have one offer, your top option, that should be 10 times the price of what you normally sell. Just the almost sticker shock option. And then be surprised when some people just say, give me the $1 million one.
There will always be people who want the top of the line. Always. You got to give them a chance for it. So you say, and you don't present it last, you present it first. So then the $75,000, whatever that guy was doing, it's compared to $1 million. There's research in restaurants. If you go to a nice restaurant with a wine list, it's a separate wine list, they always order the wines in terms of increasing price. Okay, here's this one and there's this one, and you can go up and up and up and up. Turns out that's wrong. If you start with the most expensive wine, by the time you get to the middle wine, it seems moderate, it seems inexpensive compared to if you start with the least expensive, by the time you get to the middle one, it seems expensive compared to what you presented first.
Is there a mechanism in our brain that sees the $200 bottle of wine first and immediately starts doing the math on how we can afford it? And even if we say but then all of a sudden the $85 bottle pops up and we're going, just give me that one. But we never make it down to the $16 one. And everyone who presents big to small options knows you end up with the middle or top a lot more than if you go small to big. Is that just that mechanism in our brain that we kind of sign off on the first one?
It's called anchoring. So where you anchor people's judgment first with the first thing you present them, then everything is compared to it. Right? So anchor them down here at lower, then the next thing that you present them in the middle is going to seem more expensive. It's going to seem expensive, not even just more, expensive by contrast.
Yeah.
You start up here, come down, it's inexpensive by contrast.
Well, this is a great start here, Bob, and we're super excited to get to the rest of these. And I would love to keep talking about even the first principle, but we do have 6 more to get to.
We're doing a 7-part series with Bob. We're going to record them all today. Go tell Babette that we're not going to make it for dinner this evening.
All right. Well, principle number 2 is around the idea of commitment and consistency, that people prefer to act in ways consistent with their previous actions or beliefs. Walk that out for us in some everyday language.
So, for example, we want to seem consistent within ourselves, and we want the people around us to see us as consistent. People who are inconsistent are judged as deceptive, or they say one thing and do another, or they're wishy-washy. They don't know, they can't stay to a single position. And we don't want to see ourselves that way. We don't want to see other people to see us that way. So once we've made a statement or a commitment, or we've had that brought to consciousness that we have made such a commitment in the past, now we want to be consistent with it. So, for example, there was a study done in a Chicago restaurant. I don't know how many of your followers are from Chicago, but there was a great restaurant there. Restaurant Gordon was the name of it. Gordon Sinclair was the owner, and he was having problems with no-shows, people who would call, book a table, and then they wouldn't show up for it. And so he asked his receptionist to change 2 words. Remember, we're talking about small bigs now. Inexpensive things you can say in how she took a booking. In the past, she would say, please call if you have to change or cancel your reservation. I've heard that 1,000 times. He asked her to say, will you please call if you have to change or cancel your reservation? Then he asked her to pause. And if I was on the other side, I'd fill that pause by saying, yes, of course, I was glad to. And that would be my commitment. No shows at Gordon's restaurant dropped by 64% that day and never went up, because she was inviting them to make a commitment that they had in their hearts. They did want to, right? And then now they were going to be congruent with it. They were going to stay aligned with what they had said or done. Okay, so how do we do this then? Well, let's say you're a manager and you've got a team of people and you're having a meeting with them, and each one has been given a task to perform before the next meeting. Don't let anybody out of that room until you say to each, will you be able to perform this task properly by our next meeting? And pause. Almost all of them are going to say yes. I can do this. And you have now significantly increased the likelihood that they will, because it will be aligned with what they said publicly and in your presence. That's their commitment, and they're going to live up to it.
Yeah, we've had a guest on the show and an author as well, Weldon Long, who uses the phrase cognitive dissonance, which in his terms is basically if you speak something out loud, you generate a concept in your mind that it's going to be very difficult to go against. Like you're going to feel that inconsistency.
Yeah, he credited Influence with where he came up with that premise for his book.
Yeah, and he's right. There is that exact. People hate being seen as inconsistent or looking inconsistent or feeling inconsistent. It's just not what we think about ourselves or what we want to think about ourselves. So, for example, and how does this apply to sales? You can ask a question that people will certainly want to answer yes to. So tell me, how important is it for you to have X? Safety, security, peace of mind, curbside appeal. Get an answer to that. And then say, well, here's what we can do to produce that. Now they're going to think about ways to do something they want. You didn't inject it into there. You asked them to tell you what's important to you here. Then they tell you, and then you show them how what you have is consistent with their commitment to that preference, to that value. I'll give you an example. I have he's not a friend, he's an acquaintance, who is a Boy Scout leader. He has 2 boys in a troop, Boy Scout troop, and they make money by selling popcorn on weekends outside of supermarkets. They have a table and it's banners with the Boy Scouts and big sacks of popcorn. And as people come out, they're asked, would you like to buy some popcorn? It would support the Boy Scout. Well, by the time they've said it would support the Boy Scout, people have nodded their head, shook their head. No, I was just in here. If I wanted popcorn, I would buy it. No, I don't want any of your popcorn. Now, the commitment is to know. You've gotten a commitment to know, which they're going to be consistent with. And he said, we're only getting about 15% of the people buying. What can I do? Well, try this, a small big. Just don't change the words, just change the sequence of the words. Say, excuse me, do you support the Boy Scouts? Everybody says yes. They do support the Boy Scouts. Oh, well, would you like to buy some popcorn? It would support our troop. And now they get over 50% of the people buying.
Bob, is it important for those questions to be yes or no, like binary in answer, or is it okay to ask more of like a how important is? For example, if I said, Bob, like how important is hot water to you? Is that like a good way of phrasing it? Or would you say like, Bob, would you say that hot water is very important to your family?
No, you could say it that way. You could say it either of those ways, but I wouldn't say it that way. I would say, how important is it for your peace of mind to have hot water when you need it?
Mm-hmm.
Right. So put it in a psychological place so that they can identify or to have the confidence or to be sure that when you're on vacation or that your pipes are, whatever the situation is, make it something psychological and an emotional experience that they can tap into, that they really, it's not like you're asking them to create this, you're asking them to identify it inside themselves and then act in ways that are consistent with their values, with their own manifest preferences.
Right. So when you say make it psychological, you're basically saying like tie an emotion to the question. In our world, it might be like, hey, Bob, like, when you have your family over for the holidays, is it important to you to make sure that everybody's comfortable with the temperature, when we got to get grandma sleeping over? Like, is that important to you?
Yeah, I think that, but you would want to say it, I think even a little, how much would it stress off you if you had that, right? Would that be something that stresses you if it doesn't happen? That kind of thing where they're not thinking they're being led in this direction, but you're just identifying a situation where it would be important if they felt that way, if they did assign it importance.
I think that's an important call out because it depended upon how you ask that question that you can feel like the homeowner feels like they just got pigeonholed into something.
Right.
And they're like,
Painted into a
okay,
corner, right?
shoot, I didn't see that coming, but now that I'm here, I'm not happy about it, which doesn't really aid to the conversation. Then you get what's called a frustrated buyer, someone who's just going to buy because they're angry, but then they're not using you again.
Right.
Well, this is good, and I like how commitment and consistency are both part of like the how we operate as humans. Like, that's just kind of a natural part of it. So really, it's just tying the concept of what you're presenting to the homeowner to what their normal way of doing life is, and like it's simple in nature, but I do think there's some caution to be used there in how you are deploying that with the question and framing and all those types of things, so you don't make the homeowner feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Okay, well, those are the first two principles, and we're already under a great deal of instruction here, and really these things can be applied right away. Looking forward to stepping into the next one here, which is social proof. And this is perhaps, I'll be curious, just kind of off, y'all ask this off the top here. When anybody in today's age hears social, it means something probably different than it used to mean, prior to, say, the year 2000 or so. In what social media and all that has done, do you feel like that has augmented what social proof means or altered it in any way from what it has meant into the past? So kind of walk us through that journey.
Well, social proof has to do with the fact that if you can show people that a lot of others like them have done what you're recommending or are doing what you're recommending, it reduces their uncertainty about what they should do there. Now, notice I said two things there. A lot of others, that is the many, if you can show them evidence that a lot of people have done this, you've got records and, histories of sales and trends in a particular direction. And then, like them, comparable others, because they're not going to be persuaded by what the people on the other side of the tracks are doing, whether that's the up or down, but it's the people like them. If they've made that decision, that gives them a way to decide in an uncertain world what they should do. Right? So whenever you have that information and you can show testimonials or examples or even trends in a particular direction, that's gold in today's world, because we are in an uncertain world. The way technology has worked, we have more information, more choices, more challenges, more options, more opportunities than ever. And how do we deal with that? When we're uncertain, we tend to just sit on the fence and not move. I think everybody's had those kind of customers who you just can't get to take the step. Well, one way to take the step is you reduce their uncertainty that this is the right step to take by the fact that a lot of others like them have made that choice. And that's especially difficult when you've got a new product or upgrade, let's say, where there's not a lot of history that you can point to. What do you do then? Point to the trend. If you say to people, here's our new model, or here's an upgrade, and 30% of our customers have chosen this, that's wrong, because that means 70% have not. That's the opposite of social proof. You're giving them social proof that people are saying no to it, right? But if you have anything good, you're going to see a trend to 30%. That when, 6 months ago, it was 15%. 3 months ago, it was 20%. This month, it's 30%. It's the same 30%. But we've done research on this. If you present it as a trend, you get significantly more people deciding. If you present it just as a statistic, you get significantly less people deciding after you tell them 30%.
Why is that one, the trend one?
Because people project a trend, but it has to be at least 3 data points, right? It's not just a change. It's not just, so if you say 30%, that's a statistic. If you say, it's 30% now, but 3 months ago it was 20%, that's a change. But changes can continue, they can flatten, they can go down. But 3 data points? It used to be 15, and then it was 20, and now it's 30. They project that into the future.
So do we just internally see it keeping on going up, and we just
Yes.
want to jump on this
Yes,
bandwagon?
we want to jump on the bandwagon. We don't want to get in at the basement.
Like Nate becoming a Detroit Lions fan all of a sudden with me?
So here's what I want your folks to say about a new upgrade, let's say, that they've got, or a new model. Don't just say we have this model, it's new. That's what they usually say. Don't just say we have this model and more people are buying it. Say more and more people are buying it. More and more means 3 things. From here to the next to the next. That's a trend.
So obviously you're referring to this more in the concept of like a new offering or something like that. Does the same model of trend work with like a price point, for example? And I would say, hey, Bob, listen, the price on this has really gone up with the raw materials increase and everything going on with, just the economy today. A year ago, this was this, and then last year was this, and today it's this. Like, would that same psychology work?
Exactly. If you're warning people away that you probably want to move now because this is the trend that the price growth is taking. But also, I don't want to just say when you've got something that is in the minority. If you have something that is the most popular, say that, right? This is our most popular payment plan. This is our most popular addition. There's a reason. Suddenly you've given them a reason to get off the fence and choose, because it's social proof is buttressing it. It's like when I go to a restaurant and I'm trying to lose weight before some event that's coming up next week, and the waiter comes to the table with the dessert list, and I look at it and I would like dessert. I have a sweet tooth. But I'm going to say no, unless this was a study that was done in Beijing, China, unless there's a little asterisk next to 1 or 2 of the items that says this is our most popular dessert. And then they got 15 to 20% more purchases. And it was true. They just told them what was more popular. Same thing in the UK with a pub that said, our porter is the most popular beer ordered this week. Porter sales doubled. Just tell them the truth.
Wow.
And you get the power of social proof. The problem is we don't tell them the truth a lot of times when we have it. That, we're not selling you this, or we put in this effort, or this is the one that is the most popular, or there is this trend. We just don't tell them, and we lose all of the traction associated with the influence process from just telling them the truth.
I think we're going to stop calling it the soft skills that we always refer to in the trades and start calling it the influence process, like you just said, because we're very willing in the home services and skilled trades in particular to drown our clients with technical knowledge that they do not want. But we're much more scarce with our influence and telling them things like things that we did for them that they aren't going to know about, or things that we didn't do that they're never going to know about.
No, this is really a good point. I am with you in disliking the term soft skills. It makes them seem flabby and insubstantial and weak. No, they're powerful. You can see big differences due to the leverage that they provide. They're not soft.
Well, Brian, you actually brought up a point there. It's a good segue to the next principle.
Finally.
Yes, finally.
215 episodes in.
So you talked about the idea of authority and how, in the trades, there is definitely, there is a lot of very smart, very mechanically oriented, experienced people who could do anything in your house. I mean, you show them a problem and they could do anything. And that is principle number 4 when it comes to influence, which is that people are more likely to follow the lead of someone they perceive as knowledgeable or credible. Now, we certainly have a lot of that in the trades. We also have a big influx of new people coming in who don't have that, at least, from an appearance standpoint and probably from an actual application standpoint as well. So I'd be interested to hear a little bit about how to overcome when you don't have authority. And then you also have people who perhaps use the level of knowledge that they have too much so. Like they kind of browbeat you into the fact that I know better than you. I am kind of like what you said, why you wrote the book. This knowledge is for some, but not for all, type of thing. So talk to us about principle number 4, which is authority, and how we can utilize that ethically within influence.
The first thing you said, well, what if it's not obvious what your authority is in the situation? Borrow it from testimonials, from authorities who can speak to the kinds of products you're using, to the method that you're employing, to the quality of your company and history of it. And so if you can recruit those testimonials from people, sometimes you don't have to ask them directly. They're saying it out there that this is the cutting edge approach right now, right? And so if you have those testimonials, that bolsters your authority. And one place to do that is right on your website. Before they even see you, they get information that a lot of experts, knowledgeable, credible people are saying that what you have to offer is worthwhile. And what I always say to people when they structure a website, put those testimonials first before they see anything. You're entitled to them. I want that authority influence to infuse every word that they read on your website. Why waste it later on? Or sometimes you have to go to another page to get the testimonials, right? The people who are, put it first. You're entitled to the authority that you've gained that way, and make it multiple testimonials, not one. Advertisers are going to tell you, put your best testimonial up there, just the best one, because all the others are going to dilute it, right? Turns out the research shows that's exactly wrong. If you put multiple testimonials, the best one is still there, but the subsequent ones don't dilute it. They validate that.
Mm.
Oh, this isn't just one that they cherry picked for this. No, everybody's saying good things about this. I can believe this one, the best one, as well as the others.
Yeah, baby negatives.
So multiple testimonials first. Oh, and then I'm going to give you one more thing that you can do yourself to show your expertise, your knowledge in the situation. When you give people an estimate, never make it a round number. Let's say you've thought this through. You've figured out the hours, you figured out the cost of the equipment, and it comes up to $12,111. You probably wipe off, you just say, oh, this will cost you $12,000. Wrong. That's a mistake. Where did you get $12,000? You just pull it out of the top of your head or someplace lower? Right? Where'd you get that from? But if it's $12,111, it means you did your homework. You know exactly every cent, every expense. You are knowledgeable about this task. Right?
Yeah, Chris Voss talks about that in his negotiating your salary chapter. When you go to your boss and ask for a raise, don't just, ask for, I don't know, another like $1 or something like that. Say, no, I would need $1.57 or,
Right.
$27,344. Like, because
I'm not just looking for a 10% increase. I'm looking for an 11.5% increase.
Yeah. Because why?
It's like you remember in school, in your math classes, on an exam, your instructor would say, okay, now on this exam, don't just give me the answer, show your work.
Right.
And if you show your work, I'm going to give you more credit. Well, so will your customer give you more credit.
So, Doctor, I'm sure, if you can reflect back to like some earlier years in your life, maybe the very first time that you gave a conference or a speech, or you had to present your thesis or something like that in front of some very, very credible people who were your senior by, decades or something like that. What would you say to a 20-something-year-old HVAC technician who knocks on your door, and you open the door and you look at him, and in your eyes, he is a kid. Like, this is a kid. He has no life experience. I'm not even sure he should be working. I don't know that I want him working on my very expensive HVAC system. What would you say to him, or what would you say to yourself, reflecting upon, a time when you were in a similar situation and you had to make a presentation to very wise and experienced people that they can still have some level of authority in the home? They can't rely upon a website. It's too late for that. Like, we're in the home and I'm sitting down face to face with you. What should I do?
I would say two things. One, you give them quotes from people who you have worked with. You get testimonials. It doesn't have to be experts. It can be peers. That's the social proof situation again. You can have experts, or you can have comparable others, peers, saying, I really appreciate this person's work. And you can give them names of people they could contact about you, or quotes from them. The other is to tell them the training that you just went through. I've just been through X months of the newest training or the cutting edge training. I know there are a lot of people around who've been around for a long time, but they haven't had the newest. I've just come through a new training program where we've gotten the latest cutting edge information on how to do this best. And I'm ready for it.
I like that.
You just tell them the truth.
Yeah.
But you have to choose what works for you.
What about on the other side of that? So you have a 45-year veteran of the trades, and this guy prides himself on out-knowing and out-engineering every single thing about your mechanical system. Is there a danger to having too much authority or wielding the authority inappropriately that would actually be counter-influential when it comes to influencing the client?
Yeah, I mean, you alluded to it in your earlier question, is when you are a braggart, when you are a self-promoter, right? When you're talking about yourself, you're a broker of information about how great you are. You can't sit down with people and say, before we begin, let me tell you just how great I really am. I mean, it goes against all the rules of social interaction. No, you come off, and research shows you lose credibility if you're that. So you bring with you testimonials, right? Or you bring phone numbers of people who are willing to talk about you, or you bring examples of a similar sort of situation where you were able to intervene and save them so much money. And you don't have to talk about yourself in those terms. You just give them evidence of it. And then you're not the person. It's like when I don't know if you guys are asked to be a speaker at any conference, you never introduce yourself. You have somebody do it for you. Otherwise, you come off like this boastful jerk talking about yourself. So you come with letters of introduction, you come with testimonials, you come with phone numbers that people can call, and so on. So you don't have it in writing. Give them your resume, right, of how long you've been doing this, in what kind of training programs you've been through, and what certifications you have. You give it to them without speaking it to them.
A lot of HVAC techs listening just threw their entire presentation out their truck window. You mean I just can't talk about how great and technical I am and just sell? This is ridiculous.
You can talk about your history and your experience, right? And you can bring with you a resume and just show people, and I've been this and this and this, and let that do the speaking for you.
So nobody really likes a chest beater. It comes off as you mentioned, braggadocious, or something that's just kind of like, all right, this guy's a little too full of himself. Which brings us to the fifth principle, which is liking. And that the idea there is that people are more likely to agree or be persuaded by people whom they like.
Yeah.
So
there's no surprise there, is there?
No, but how does one become likable, especially in the home services, when you only have sometimes 15, 20 minutes of actual face-to-face conversation?
Yeah. There are two things. I mean, there's a lot of ways to be seen as more likable, but one is similarities. We like people who are like us. Brian and I had breakfast the other day, and we found commonalities. We found parallels in our histories and our approaches to things, which immediately increased the favorabilities that we felt toward one another. So it does require a little bit of sociable interaction with folks, or you can find in their homes pieces of memorabilia or art or flags or whatever it might be, where you can resonate and say that, yeah, I agree with you. So you were on vacation. I was there. Isn't that a wonderful place? That kind of thing. So that's one, pointing out genuine similarities. And that does
Genuine.
Genuine similarities. And again, we have the internet, which is our ally in this. You can check people out before you visit them. What do they say about themselves on Facebook and on LinkedIn and so on? And if you find similarities, you can raise them. You're a runner. I'm a runner. Really, whatever. Okay. The other one is compliments, genuine compliments, giving people honest praise for the way their house looks or the wisdom they had of calling you before the warranty was up, and so whatever the thing is that is true about something that is admirable that you can point to, comment on it. Not only do people like those who are like them, they like those who do like them and say. So, and then there's one more I'm going to use, and that's, well, okay, we're in the world of technology now. We all have a website. How do you get liking online? How do you possibly get liking? You don't have any history with people. You don't have any interactions with them. They don't know you. You don't know them. There was a study done of 6,700 online commercial websites. And they did A/B tests where they looked at 29 different factors, and they put it in and took it out and looked at the difference in conversion rate, all right, with having that fact. And some of the factors were economic, like free shipping, okay? Some were technological, like, oh, is there a search function in this site where the visitor can go anywhere they want? Some were actually sales related, like, is there a call to action line in the site and so on? Well, I'm happy to say that the principles of influence were at the top. Is there real social proof? Is there real scarcity? Is there real authority? Right. If you can speak to those things, those were the things that produced the greatest. But among them was liking. How could they get liking online? Small, big. And it's something we now put on our website. If you have a welcoming statement on your landing page, welcome to our site. We're so glad that you decided to join us. The way you would welcome people to your home, the way you would welcome them into a brick and mortar business office that you have. If you welcome them to your site, before they see anything about your offer, they're more likely to buy.
So, Bob, sometimes that feels counterintuitive because there's multiple ways people would use our services, right? Sometimes people might be preventative minded. And so they're more open to like a slow and developmental relationship. Oh, wow, these guys seem really nice. I'd like to have them come service my HVAC unit. A lot of other times, though, people come to us out of a need, an unfortunate need, because something is broken, not working properly, flooding their home, sparking, et cetera, et cetera. And it's out of frustration. And I would say the industry trend would be like, give them the phone number, give them the information they need. They might not even get your website. They're just going to click, call, and go. So in scenarios where somebody is more like urgent, the need is urgent for our services, something's broken, not working. Is there still an element of likability that plays into that scenario? Or is it really just about like speed of service?
No, good question. Absolutely, there is an element of likability. How long does it take to say welcome?
Not long at all.
Now, everything you say after that, including the urgency, including your knowledge, including your ability to be there, that's built on top of a platform of emotional favorability.
Mm-hmm.
So you can stack these principles. One doesn't have to supplant the other. They can both be there in the situation. And you're wise to establish liking before anything else, if possible, to do it.
Yeah.
And by the way, one way to do it is the more human you can be, like welcoming people in.
Right.
The more that you show them that they're dealing with a person, not a company, the better off you'll be.
Well, we're running short on time here, Doctor, and I wanted to cover these last two. The next one, principle number 6, is scarcity. And out of all of the principles, to me, this is the one that seems the most volatile. To me, this is the one that seems to have the most opportunity for success, meaning like it works. Like when people feel like something's going to be lost or they're not going to get the opportunity or they're going to miss out, fear of missing out, FOMO, is a real thing. But to me, it also has the potential of being the most gimmicky, like the one that's like, as Brian mentioned, we are recording this on Black Friday. There's no better scenario to point out than almost every Black Friday sale that you see. If you went back 2 days, you would see the exact same price, but without the discount, right? So, it was $100 on Wednesday. Today, it's $120, but hey, $20 off. So you are saving. And this is only going to be good for today only. And tomorrow it's just back to the same price minus the discount.
Yeah, there's the danger of that. And if you find it, would you ever do business with somebody who tried to trick you?
Nope.
You never. Right. So you have to be absolutely honest about it. So, for example, if you have something that is unique in your service that none of your rivals can provide, bring that to the top. That means they can't get it anywhere else. It's scarce. Right. Now, it may not be one thing. It may be a suite of things. A combination of features that only you and your company can provide. Bring that to the top. So the other is, you were right about fear of missing out. That's one of the drivers of the scarcity principle. People are averse to losing. And you were talking earlier about selling benefits and advantages, right? Advantages. Here's what the research shows. Sell them benefits and advantages, but don't just tell them what they will gain from those benefits and exams. Tell them what they will lose if they don't. Research shows people are more motivated to avoid losing something of value than gaining that very same thing. And here's an example from a study that was done with home improvement. So this was a group that was selling insulation and weather stripping. They went to certain homes that offered an energy audit where they could see how much energy was being used and lost. And for half of the people in that neighborhood, that let's say they said, you will be able to save $1 a day every day if you fully insulate and weather strip your home. That was for half of them. The other half were told, if you don't fully insulate your home, you'll lose $1 a day every day. Significantly more people bought the package. They were told what they would lose. It's the same dollar. But humans are more motivated to avoid losses than to gain the very same objects of the very same thing. Right?
Yeah, we hate waste.
Yes. Honestly.
Somebody should start a podcast about that. I don't know.
Yeah. So you just tell people what they will forego. They hate that. They will miss. They will lose. Oh, they hate it. And it's true. It's what they most want to hear. They want to hear what they will lose because loss is really important to people.
Yeah. So you're saying it needs to be genuine so that it doesn't create this false premise that people operate on and therefore break trust if it's ever revealed. So let's just say we're on a promotion right now, hey, it's $100 off of this service or something like that, and it's good till the end of the month. How can you present that in such a way that it doesn't feel gimmicky or that the person, feels like they're being taken advantage of?
Before you do, it's not just so you don't get found out by that client and break trust. There's also that's the exterior component. The interior component of that is you yourself Or more importantly, your staff will understand that you are the type of person and they are on the type of team that can mislead people to make $1. And nobody's going to feel good about pretending to give a discount that doesn't really exist. And if they just shove it down and do it anyway, then we're all turning in a direction of becoming that type of person.
Right. You give discounts that really do exist. You just don't fake them.
Yep.
You don't do it as papering it over. And then you're entitled to it. Now, you're going to make less money because you've given them a discount or a rebate or something, but you're going to drive more business. So it's a choice you've made. As long as it's genuine, everybody wins.
Is there research on this kind of thing? Like, let's say I can offer 10% off a $5,000 system, let's say, and that's a $500 discount that I may or may not have within my margins and could cost me the profit on that job. Or take a $100 bill and go buy a $100 Visa gift card and say that anyone who purchases this package before the end of this month gets a $100 Visa gift card with this purchase. Is there any research on what kind of effect either one has, even though one's 5 times as valuable? On that one, you're just kind of getting a discount that, man, the discounts, they rarely feel real anymore, as Nate was saying. But that gift card is real. You're actually going to get handed that.
That's palpable. That's real. Yeah. And I would just add to it what we just talked about. You say, we have a $100 gift card waiting for you. You don't want to lose that.
Mm-hmm.
That's all.
Yeah. So you can hit it both ways.
Yeah.
So good, doctor. So good. And that brings us to our conclusion here, which is principle number 7.
Well, we've already talked about that one.
We started with that, but I wanted what the principle is unity, and I brought that up in terms of your background things. But I wanted to see if you could explain for us the difference between principle number 7 and unity and principle number 3 in terms of social proof. Social proof is kind of like, follow the pack mentality. This is what everybody else is doing. Isn't that kind of what unity is? What's the difference there?
The difference is this is what everybody in my category are doing, the people who are of me. It's not simply like me. It's of me, who share an identity. It can be a political identity, a religious identity. It can be a local identity. It can be an employment identity. Whatever it is, it's instead of similarity, it's belonging to a category. And if you can be in that category with other people, they will be more interested in saying yes to you.
Gotcha. So same group mentality, but more specificity to the group, I guess, right? So it's not just generic social proof. This is my people.
Of me, one of us.
Yeah.
That person is one of us, not just like us. One of us makes a big difference.
So good, doctor. The concepts or the principles there again are reciprocity, commitment and consistency, social proof, authority, liking, scarcity, and unity. As we bring this in for a close here, it's those 7 principles that are really indicating the ability to influence people. Now, as you think about this, are these solely able to influence individuals? Do these have group impacts? I mean, most of our listeners are dealing with singular people, like maybe one person, maybe a husband and a wife, 2 people. Rarely is it more than that when they're doing their presentation or their work. So do these principles, are they relative to both the group and the individual? Do they have better tendencies one way or the other?
No, they're relevant to both. And I'll tell you why, because there are people involved in the groups who are making the decision. And so there's still human psychology and individual psychology involved.
Yeah. Well, if people are interested in learning more about this, obviously we only had a little bit of time to go through some very deep material today. Or in your other book, Pre-Suasion, where's great places to get connected with these resources, with you, and more about that?
We have a startup company called the Cialdini Institute, where we teach these principles in ethical, efficient, research-based ways. And people can get online contact, or they can get training with us at cialdini.com.
Perfect. And for those of you listening, that's CIALDINI.com. So make sure you hit him up there, and I'm sure he'd appreciate that. These are incredible principles. As we bring things in for a close here, Doctor, it's been an honor to have you on the show. And one thing that I wanted to ask you here as we wrap up is a concept that had been brought up through some of the principles we discussed earlier here, which is if you don't tell it, or if you don't display it, or if you don't bring an awareness to what you're doing, the impact is lost. We have a lot of servants in the trades, a lot of people, a lot of humility, hey, listen, I'm just out here to fix your system. I'm not trying to be whiz bang or anything like that. And there could be an element of like, well, why didn't you bring that up? Because it was no big deal. Like, to me, it's no big deal. Like, it was just the right thing to do. Or why didn't you bring that up? Well, because I don't know, kind of felt prideful to say something like that to him, specifically to like the reciprocity where I did this for you. I have to verbalize that. Or even in the commitment and consistency, where like it's just, if it's not being brought, if things aren't being publicized, if you will, it's not as valuable. In an industry where there's a lot of people who are serving, there's a lot of people who are just like, I'm just here to help you, man. Like, I'm here to help you. There might not be as large of a desire to make a big show about that. Is it okay? Like, how do we find balance with, my personal perspective on what I think is a big deal and what I need to beat my chest on against like what is valuable when it comes to influencing the homeowner? How do we kind of balance that as we wrap up the show today?
Well, I think it's a good point. The point is not to be seen as someone who is promoting yourself for your self-interest, but that you're offering things to enhance the outcomes of your customer or your prospect. This is what you're all about. That's who you are. And send that message.
Great words to close on there, Dr. Cialdini. This has been an honor to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining us today and taking some time to explain these deep and yet very practical concepts and principles to our listeners. I know they've appreciated. I sure have as well. And it's been great to have you on.
Well, I enjoyed it. So long for now.
That's a wrap for this episode. We hope that you enjoyed the time with Dr. Cialdini. It was great to hear from him. And man, this is super applicable stuff. Read the book, pick it up, listen to all 7 of these, but at least choose one of them to really focus on and go deep. These are deep things that can really have great significance in what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. It may be too much to try to digest 7 at once. So start with one that makes sense to you and start implementing some of those ideas into your presentation and what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. Love to hear your feedback on what's working on that. And I'm sure the good doctor would as well. So hit him up on his social medias or resources and let him know that you enjoyed his episode. Share this around, and we are sure that other people would be interested with it as well. Social proof, right? So lots of people listen to Waste No Day. You can make others do the same as well. But it was really great to hear from him, and we are so thankful that he came on the show with us. We'll leave you now with our weekly challenge, which continues to be the same: to choose to wake up each and every morning and waste no day.